Hello, it's Zoe. And exhale. You've made it. You've made it to the end of 2021. I've made it to the end of 2021. And the question we really need to ask is, what shall we make of it? Let's do the show.
Welcome to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast, where we share all things people stuff in leadership. Learn from leaders who have done the hard yards and learned from experience. Hear from expert authors about the latest insights from culture to strategy and messy people dynamics. Get tips and insights from multiple award-winning author and leadership expert herself, Zoe Routh. Now, on with the show.
So I'm sitting in my renovated bunker. Renovated bunker just means that I added a milk crate and moved things around a bit, so it's a little bit more comfortable than sitting on the ground. This really is a non-glamorous experience, let me tell you. And yet, I think this new arrangement could work. I'm trying to optimize for sound and comfort, as well as being able to see guests. So I think this is iteration number 4 or 5, and we might be getting close. I'm still sitting on a Swiss ball, though, and it's a bit squeaky. So when I'm sitting here, I can't jiggle around too much. Otherwise, it's squeak, 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 and my sound editor will have something to say about it, that's for sure. Well, this is episode 242. Who knew we would get to this many episodes? I started the podcast. It's been 5 years, I think. So that's 5 years of interviewing people, producing content, reflecting on the world, reflecting on leadership. And some listeners have been with us the entire time. And if that's you, thank you so much. That is just truly amazing. I appreciate your ears tuning in each week to hear what I have to say and what guests have to say. And if you're brand new to the show, oh my goodness, welcome, welcome. I'm so delighted to have you here. So the more that we listen to uplifting ideas and really challenge our thinking, the better leadership we're going to have around the world. And that is my mission. Absolutely. This year, we've had 37 guests. This has been a great cross-section of leaders, so people in the trenches, leading teams, struggling with leadership struggles, like what to do in a pandemic, how you deal with difficult situations, how you deal with power struggles with your board, all that kind of stuff. And we've had some amazing authors as well share their insights on particular topics. We organized the content this year into different themes that mirror the journey of Amplifiers. So Amplifiers has 4 main skills: lead strategy, lead culture, lead change, and lead performance. And so we've divided up the year across those 4 themes with subtopics. And as I record this, we're in the middle of lead performance. Lead performance, and the subtopic is high-performing teams. It's been an incredibly popular topic. I think this is really fundamental to leaders, and it's kind of like, how do I get the secret sauce? How do I get the superstar team? And there's absolutely stuff that we can do to bring that about and to avoid all the pitfalls, the silos, the power struggles, which is going to be the topic of my next book. Yep, of course, I have another book in the pipeline. I'm going to write it in the first quarter of the year. That's my intention anyway. And I'm thinking of calling it Power Games. So you heard it first here. Power Games is on the cards. That's coming along, as well as the novel. Yep. I finished the draft of the novel. The editor has had it for a month and a bit now. I heard from him this morning. And as I record this, it is December. Geez, what is the date today? I think it's the 16th, December 16th. And as we record this, he says he's going to get it back to me early next week. So I'll have it back right before Christmas, which is either a good thing or a terrible thing, I'm not sure. But no doubt I will be chewing on whatever he has to say about the novel after that. And no doubt there'll be a lot of reworking and more editing to go before we get it anywhere close to printing. So when can you expect the novel, I hear you ask? Probably March-ish is what I am guessing, given that we've got to go through a couple rounds of edits and I've got to do rewrites and get a cover design and all the production side of it, and probably get somebody to do the audio. There's no way I'm recording my own novel. I can't. That is not one of my talents in terms of narrating a fiction book. Narrated my own people stuff book, but fiction, nah. Somebody else can do the accents and bring it to life. And that'll be kind of fun too. So all that's on the cards for next year. But let's talk about this year that we're wrapping up, 2021. Yeah, year 2 of a global pandemic. And what do we have? Well, lots of things, essentially. And when it comes to perspective, we need to start with perspective on ourselves first. And I think that is actually the theme word for me for this year is developing perspective. It's something that I've worked hard with my amplifiers group to help them extend and expand and add nuance and complexity to their perspective. And in doing so, I've added complexity and nuance to my own perspectives and challenging thinking. So with perspective, I was thinking about what has this year been for me? What have I experienced? What have I learned? So starting with perspective on myself, I've learned that I like to push the envelope, and not always in a good way. I like to push my limits. In previous years, this has been sort of burning the candle at both ends until you fry yourself. So I've moved away from that, thank goodness. The way that it's manifesting now is a little bit different for me, and it's more like I think my body's up to more than it is capable of. And if you've been listening all year, then you know that I injured my back in March. And it took 5 months to repair itself. 5 months of no running, 5 months of heat packs. It was a long time. And it was quite challenging for me to get to the bottom of that. And I went to a physio. I got injections in my butt to try and loosen it all up. Like, you name it. I worked on it. One physio thinks that it's because my ribs are crushed together on one side. And that I need to work on stretching those out, I guess. Anyway, it's been a long, boring journey. And then I injured my back again, not 2 weeks ago. Oh my God, I couldn't believe it. Different injury, different side of the back. I'm like, I did it again. I just pushed the envelope. I just pushed past my boundaries. So what is the lesson for me? Know my limits. Well, that just sounds limiting. I think it's more, rest more. Heed the body. You need to rest as well as put effort out. And it's one of my key principles that I teach, of course. Knock, knock, knock. You always teach what you most need to learn, and I'm still bloody learning that one. The other thought I had was that, and I've said this often, that my body does not match my ambition. And then I had to challenge that. Is that actually true? Is it true that my body's not up to what my mind think it can do? Or maybe I just push it and I don't allow it to rest. So that kind of caught me off guard. I'm like, ooh, got to challenge my own thinking. And that's really the theme of this year in terms of what I've presented on the show and what I've talked to other guests about is challenge your thinking. What are new ways of seeing and interpreting what's going on? Because as an example, the thought my body does not match my ambition is not really a helpful thought. It's a limitation. And it's not even possibly true. So the way that I like to check my thinking is to have a statement and realize I'm making a statement. It's based on belief as opposed to fact, and then challenge it and ask, is this true? And this is straight out of the handbook from Byron Katie. The leaf out of her book, that's the expression. She has a series of questions about challenging your thinking. And the first one, is it true? It doesn't sound like a very helpful thought. Is it true? So that kind of stopped me in my tracks when I thought about this. Body does not match ambition. The second insight is this. I seek approval. Oh my goodness. Yep. So that little 13-year-old, 14-year-old self is still pretty active. And I know I'm not the only one who has this. I know there's plenty of people listening who go, yeah, I've got a tendency in there. And it shows up in unhelpful ways when we give away our power. And the way that it showed up for me recently is around the editor with my novel. And when I first submitted it to him, I hoped that he would come back with something like, this is okay. Like that would be amazing. Or at least this doesn't suck. I've had nothing of the sort from him. I had one tiny piece of positive feedback, which said, I like what you did in terms of changing the backstories as per his recommendations. That was it. Not like the writing is great or the story is great, like nothing. So even though I don't have his edits back yet, I'm like, wow, what is that about? Would it matter if he liked the book or not? Would it matter? It would be amazing if he did. What really matters, though, is being open to the feedback. And the feedback is not about you as human. It's about the work. And I've got to keep reminding myself that. And it's absolutely what I teach in my workshops, my real talk conversation workshops around feedback, is when you're delivering or receiving feedback, it's not about you. It's about the behavior. It's about the work. So in which case, I don't need to seek approval. I just need to be open to making the work better. And that's the real kind of approval, isn't it? It's being willing to work on the work until it resonates, until it's of service, until it's useful for someone. And then the I seek approval thing, I'm sure it's still going to be hovering there in the background, but it doesn't need to drive the show. I can put it on a leash. There you go. That's two metaphors smashed together. I'll put my seeking approval gremlin on a leash and try and tame it a little bit. The third thing I worked out this year, which has been delightful, is how much joy I get in the simple things. Well, with so many lockdowns and so many slowdowns and so much travel not happening, I learned to discover how much joy I get in tending my plants, my indoor plants in my outdoor garden jungle, which it is. I just love it. And I don't know, it's the act of caring for some other living creature. It's the joy of watching my little plant grow every day. I have this little, I don't even know what it's called. I have to Google it and have a look at it. It's got these little baubles, these little beads. It's like pearls on a string kind of plant. And I know it's grown because it didn't dangle over the sides of its pot, and it's a hanging plant, and now it's dangling about a meter. It's amazing. I just love watching this thing grow. It's really cool. So tending the plants is one of the things that's bringing me a lot of joy right now, as well as baking. I just love baking. I love finding new recipes and testing them out, and that brings me a lot of creative joy on the weekends. And then the last thing, now that the weather is warming up here in Australia, is sitting on my deck and listening to the birds. The deck is quite high, and we're sort of at crown level with my almond tree, and the birds come and hang out in the almond tree, and the parrots come and nibble at the almonds, and it's just a whole zoo out there, and it's just wonderful to sit and listen to them and watch the birds' activities. We even had this like bird and rat face-off one evening. So my husband threw some rice out in the garden, and the birds came down. There was a big cacophony of them. And then we saw this thing scurry past, and we're like, what is that? And it must have been the rat we thought we had in the compost. So we watched this war that went on between the rat and the birds, where the rat would scramble out from underneath the bushes and nibble at some rice and then run away, and the birds would chase it. And then the rat got a little bit more bold. It came out and it would challenge the birds and have a little bit of a standoff and then run away. And then the rat came out and hopped at the birds, like hopped like a kangaroo. We're like, what rat ever does that? Never seen a rat do that. Of course, then we Googled it, and there is a kangaroo rat in Australia. Ha! It's a native animal, and we had one in our backyard, and it was the coolest thing ever. So anyway, that was our David Attenborough moment of the year. And it brought us so much joy. When it comes to shifting perspective, though, the two things really helped me do that this year, and I know it did with my clients as well, are books and podcast interviewees. And before I get into that, I think in terms of the bigger picture of what's happening in the world, this year for me in the zeitgeist was really conversations around vaccines. To vax or not to vax, the attitudes toward vaccines, vaccine hesitancy, restrictions around vaccinated or unvaccinated people. And it is emotional and it is volatile and it can be quite polarizing. And I've been watching the conversations and sitting with my own perspectives around it and seeking new ideas about it. And I think this is progress from the year before in terms of zeitgeist topics, because the year before was all about the US-American election and being challenged by everything that was happening around that, culminating in the January 6th incursion, it's not an invasion, I guess, assault on the Capitol, and what that all meant for American culture and globally as the world watched this whole thing shake down. So we've moved on in some ways from the conversation around that, but the polarization topic is just manifesting in now the vaccine topic. And I think the most important book for me that helped me explore polarized conversations is Buster Benson's Why Are We Yelling? We interviewed him on the show, and there'll be links to his interview in the show notes. And that was amazing. This book, more than any of the other books I read this year, really helped me to sit in the intention to be curious about another human and to really park my own point of view and really get curious about what's going on for them. How do they come to this belief? What led them to it? What does it mean for them? And doing so is to holding them as another human being, sacred in their own right, entitled to their opinions and their own way of living. And I think this has really helped me stop demonizing other people. And I think that's really important if we're going to build bridges and get to common solutions and to find common ground, is that you can't hold the other person as fill in the blank, an idiot or crazy or any moniker that you would assign to somebody who doesn't believe what you believe. So Buster's book was really, really helpful for that. And as I did some work thinking about this book and talking about it with the amplifiers, they all got a copy of it in their program. I came up with looking at polarized conversations through the lens of identity first. It's like, why? So whatever position you have on vaccines, say, for example, there's an identity that we hold about ourselves that leads to this belief. What is that identity? And I was watching a YouTube video with Awaken with JP. And as far as I can tell, and it's hard to tell because it's satire, JP advocates an anti-vaccination stance, a freedom of thought, freedom of choice position, because he satirizes what he calls the liberal viewpoint on that. And one of the key things that came through in the video that I was watching was he believes himself to be a critical thinker, and he believes that the current vaccination wars in the US are a war on critical thinkers. And this is a cue and clue to the fact that critical thinking is a key component to this particular person's identity. And they filter their belief through that lens. And to be a critical thinker, this is the way I sort of assessed it anyway, means to challenge what is being told to you by people in positions of authority. And I think this is a reasonable thing to do, right? We shouldn't just swallow hook, line, and sinker anything that we hear from anybody, really. We should be able to distinguish and to challenge whatever information comes our way. So I think from a position of identity, that's really important. And so the next part is interesting, and I think that's where people diverge in terms of their approach. It's like, okay, what is the source of truth? What is the source of evidence that you're holding up to back up your beliefs? But at the core of it, though, is the belief about being a critical thinker. And I can see that in another human who has different opinions to me. That's an important identity to them. And I have no bones to pick with that whatsoever. And so the conversation then becomes not about your beliefs, but what led to those beliefs. So I think that's really, really helpful in terms of untangling the mess of polarized conversations, whether it's vaccinations or any other polarized view. So Why Are We Yelling was the book that really helped with that. Now, I've got a big long list of books that I recommend and reviewed this year. And in my monthly newsletter, the big long list is there. It's on my blog, so we'll put a link to that blog also in the show notes, so you can go through and have a detailed look at all the books that I recommend for this year. So I'm not going to go through the entire list here. I want to go the highlights. This year I read over 134 books. I can't believe it. I set out to have the goal of reading 52, like one a week. I thought that's reasonable. And I've smashed through heaps. How? How is the question. And there's a number of different things I did as a strategy. I listen to a lot of audiobooks now. That's sort of I've ramped up my audiobook listening. I listen to all the audiobooks on at least 1.5 times speed, sometimes 1.7 and 2 times speed. And at first, it sounds really, really weird. But the thing is, your brain actually adjusts and can process it now. I find it really difficult to watch any videos or listen to any podcasts that aren't at 1.5 speed. It just annoys me. It's just like talking too slow. So if you're listening to me at regular speed, good on you. I encourage you to put me on at 1.5 speed. You get through the whole audio a lot faster, and your brain will pick it up and remember it better too, apparently, according to the science. So that's one strategy. I listen to a lot of fiction books in particular, and biographies and nonfiction political analysis on audiobook. On my Kindle, which I read on my iPad, so I have the Kindle app on my iPad, I read a lot of books. And all of my nonfiction books that I want to refer to, I read on the Kindle so that I highlight as I go along, and I can extract those notes for study, reflection, and sharing later. So those are two ways that I've gotten through the material. And I skim read some books. So the way that I do that is I study, and I learned this from Matt Church at Thought Leaders. He suggests that you read the book blurb, so you get a big picture overview of what the book's about. You study the table of contents to give you a sense of the logical progression of the ideas. And then depending on how they've written the book is that you go for the key principles. And I read all those in terms of each chapter has a core premise or core idea that it unpacks through case studies or stories. Excuse me. So I do that, and if it's really resonating with me, then I will slow down and read the case studies and stories. And otherwise, I go the key points and move on. I'll study the graphs and diagrams if they have them as well to understand what the author is all about. So that's one of the ways that I get through that amount of books. So let me tell you about the ones that I think are really good. So I already mentioned Buster Benson's. Books that helped me think better about others. Adam Grant's, I just read his latest book, just recently. Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know by Adam Grant. Really good book. It's a nice compliment to Buster Benson's as well. And he basically advocates for taking a scientific view or approach to your point of view and to be open to learning new stuff and to be excited. To be excited to be proven wrong or to be excited to learn new things. Because that's how we grow and expand and add color to our points of view. So Think Again is a nice compliment to Buster Benson's Why Are We Yelling? Now, this was another hidden gem that really changed the way that I see the world around me, and it's called The Hidden Life of Trees, What They Feel, How They Communicate, Discoveries from a Secret World by Peter Wohlleben. I wasn't expecting this one. It was like a free offer, I think, on Audible, which is the audio platform I'm using. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'll listen to that. I like trees. It was a miracle book. It really had me thinking about what's going on for trees, how they communicate, how they support one another, what's important to them. It was really, really cool. So my next walk through the bush after listening to this was amazing. I just saw the trees around me in a totally different light. Now, he's UK based, and so the trees were all kind of UK ecology. It's quite a bit different here in Australia. And I would love for somebody to do a book in a similar way on the trees in Australia, because it'd be amazing to walk through the bush with that kind of understanding of the bush. And of course, the First Nations people of this land would know all about that. They're so tuned to nature, they would be able to have conversations about that. And we don't have enough of their knowledge accessible. They're an oral culture for the most part, and we're slowly moving to help capture their stories and their knowledge. But there's a whole cultural lore as part of that. So that is my big wish of the year. Let me see. A couple other books I keep turning to. The Art of Impossible by Stephen Kotler. I quote his work all the time, and I apply it directly to how I show up and do my own work. Getting into flow state is integral, important to how I do work. It's how I can manage to produce so much content and feel alive and energized by it. It's also getting me primed to start writing again. I'm like, I've got the itch. I just noticed this yesterday. I'm like, I haven't written anything for about a month since I gave it all to my editor. In terms of creative piece, I've written lots of newsletters and that kind of stuff. It's a little bit different when you're working on a bigger project. I'm like, I got the hunger for that. So Art of Impossible helps prime you to get into that. Let me just see here. Oh, other notables. Power of Ritual by Casper Del Tuile. This was about bringing the art of practice, of sacred practice to your everyday world. And I love this. And it just helps me slow down and savor the moment. So that's been a really beautiful book. And more recently, 4,000 Weeks by Oliver Burkeman. I thought it was a productivity book. And I started reading. I'm like, come on, where are the productivity tips? And it was irritating me. So I flipped to the appendix at the back where he summarized all his key principles. Then I realized this book is not about how to do more, better, faster. It's like, no, it's realizing that you can't do everything and that you have to choose, and that's okay. And it's basically philosophy of living better and enjoying things more. I'm like, So I went back to the beginning and read it with different eyes and really thoroughly enjoyed that particular book. I read a whole bunch of fiction, more fiction than I have in previous years. And that's probably because I wrote my first novel. I thought I want to be exposed to as many other novelist as possible. It's been a long time since I did my English literature degree. And what are people writing these days? How are they writing? And so I've been reading across different genres, and I fell in love with a bunch of different authors. Jodi Picoult, she is an incredibly popular author. I can't believe I haven't read any of her stuff before. Her writing is just scrumptious. I loved it. And her first book that I read was The Book of Two Ways, which I listened to as an audiobook. And then I bought Small Great Things, which is a beautiful tale of race relations in the U.S. And it was just so incredibly well written. I just loved it. Pierce Brown, his Red Rising sci-fi series, my editor talked about. So I picked up the first book, raced through that, and then promptly read all the other books that he's written. I think there's 5. Just loved it. I loved the story. It's fast-paced. It's dynamic. And he writes in present tense. So it was interesting. So everything happens now in the book, you know. So he talks about his characters, and he gets up and he walks over to her and he says this. And normally when I'm reading books, it's all in past tense. So that was really weird. And I found it interesting how when I was reviewing my novel writing, present tense voice slipped in because I've written most of it in past tense. So obviously when I was reading the Pierce Brown books, the present tense influence showed up in how I was writing. Interesting. And the other author is John Birmingham. Likewise, I got a freebie on Audible as a freebie offering on his Zero Day series, and I just loved it. It was full on. It was about the apocalypse when the internet gets taken down and what happens to a group of different people across the U.S. and they come together and go through a bunch of different experiences. Really cool series, really well narrated. Holy cow, it really brought to life that whole book. So I really enjoyed that. Now, when it comes to the podcast, like the podcast, my podcast, our podcast, had so many wonderful interviews, so many different great insights. And I want to share you the most listened to episode of all time, and it shifts every week. But this one has been at the top of the list for a few weeks now, is Leadership Skills in Corporate Culture with Avril Foster. And she's a co-leader, co-founder of Phelps Reed Foster Johnson. So her and her colleague, Brooke, became partners at Phelps Reed, and she talks about her journey, about how they consolidated the culture there and what they're doing to maintain it. So that is the most popular episode of all time. And in fact, I think it's true that the most popular episodes on the show are the ones where we interview leaders like Avril, where they talk about how I did it, how I'm doing it, what I'm struggling with. And if that's true for you, do send me an email, Zoe@ZoeRouth, and let me know. I'd love to know what kind of stories float your boat and light you up. Here we go, double metaphor again. The ones that you enjoy most and are most useful to you. For me, the most inspiring story was probably Jeff Korsnick, based on his book, Second Chance Hiring. And this was all about how businesses set up an ecosystem around ex-felons. So they had a chance to learn how to work and how to hold down a job. And it requires them learning often some basic life skills. And the reason I found this so inspiring is that it takes a systems approach to look at making generational change. You can't just offer somebody a job and expect them to be grateful and to carry on and solve their problems. People have complex backgrounds. They don't necessarily have all the resources that other people have. And Jeff's insights, I think, were absolutely fantastic. And it just uplifted me so much to know that there's organizations and leaders out there willing to look at the difference they can make in the community by taking on people who wouldn't necessarily get that second chance and building systems around them. Now, he says that it makes sense, right? There are a huge pool of resources, and there's a shortage of resources out there, and they're a good resource to. So from a pragmatic point of view, there's a whole bunch of rationale of why this makes sense business-wise. It still takes effort, and it's easier to sit with the status quo, except when the status quo no longer works, which is what he's arguing. In any case, really inspiring. I thought that was really amazing how businesses are doing that over in the US, and I'd love to see them do that around the world and here in Australia too. Now, the episode that got under my skin and has still left me chewing on stuff with a different approach to feedback is episode 224, A Paradigm Shattering Leadership Perspective from Carol Sanford. Sanford she was a delight to interview. She's like 80 something. She's a full on character. She's got renegade opinions about how to build people, how to build businesses. And this regenerative approach to leadership and life is particularly interesting. Her work is not gritty, complex, and I have to work more slowly through her books than with other ones. And so it's kind of challenging my brain a little bit to understand fully the concepts and how they apply. So that's the one that's left me chewing on things a little bit. So that's a summary of learning, lessons, recommendations from the year. Looking forward to 2022. Our theme through to February is still leading performance, high-performing teams, and then we move into looking at hybrid teams, how we actually work with people who are in the office, out of the office, remote, asynchronous, all that kind of stuff. How do we do that as leaders? It requires new skills, new approaches. So we're going to be diving into that a little bit. And I'm going to be changing up the format of the podcast at some stage. I don't know what that looks like yet, but it's my intention to change it up a bit. Guaranteed, though, we'll be coming to you every week with insights from authors and leaders and myself. So lastly, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for tuning in and listening and applying and digesting and processing, and for the courage to lead. If you're a leader, it is hard, bloody work. It is hard to sit there every day to contend with the unknown, every day deal with other people's issues, every day solve problems, all in the service to a higher purpose. And so my wish for you is that you congratulate yourself on making it this far through the year, that you've done a great job in terms of doing the best with what you've got in the circumstances that have been a lot beyond our control, and created some magnificent results. So do take time to look after yourself. Hopefully you do get a little bit of a break. And even if you don't, because you can't, make sure you find the space and time to find delight in the little things. I look forward to seeing you and hearing you and connecting with you in 2022. So in the meantime, live well, lead well.
You've been listening to the Zoe Routh Leadership Podcast with leadership expert Zoe Routh. For more about people stuff and to contact Zoe, go to zoerouth.com.